session.
Right. Okay, it is 2:30 and we will have 2024 budget study session. I'll look to city manager to see if he has any comments to make before we turn it over to.
I do. So the group you have here today is the team that's been working on the personnel expense estimation. And as we've discussed before, personnel expense is the bulk of our budget. Services very much what we do, and it's very dependent on our employees. In excess of 70% of our expenditures are personnel expenses. So that certainly numerically drives the budget. We've had conversations recently in strategic planning about making a competitive wage rate and the employees number one priority. And then just practically speaking, it's kind of the big deciding point that helps inform us as we then try to balance the budget with the other expenditure items. And so we've got quite a bit of information here. The intention isn't necessarily to bog down in or dive too deeply into staffing levels and personnel numbers, but I know that's generally of interest. It is certainly something. I think the point that we want to make and some of the information that we provide you is to show to you what methodology we use in the process we went through to do our best to estimate personnel expenses. It varies widely, and each year it's something that we struggle to. It's as much art as it is science, but we did try to go back and look at historic data and make some projections based on that. So you're certainly welcome to ask us questions in detail as we get into some of that, but we're not necessarily asking how many police officers, as an example, do you think we should assume, as much as show you here's how we came up to our estimates. Rick Welch, Deputy Finance Director, I think is going to be taking the lead in this presentation. He certainly deserves a lot of credit, but he doesn't deserve all the blame as we go forward with all this. We need to share that. So I'll turn it over to him, and we'll see where the conversation takes us.
All right.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Rick Welch, Deputy Finance Director. As we start flipping through the page on the agenda, we're going to continue to build on the 2024 budget and discuss personnel expenses, an initial budget overview, and finally the next steps. We will begin this with just the basic wages and then add in other additional personnel expenses to create a total employee cost. Throughout this, we will be looking at the funds, the general fund, arts and humanities, sanitation, solid waste, golf, water and wastewater, and central garage. The first slide here shows the historical full-time salary results. This goes back to 2018 and represents the basic wages for full-time classified personnel for all the funds. As you can see, the city has done a good job of budgeting salaries, with only 2019 and 21 where actuals were slightly over budget. We did do a projection for 2023. We do project it to be about 90%, 97% of budget. And this was done with wages through the end of May.
I may inject as we go here, but as we pulled these numbers together, I was surprised how close we actually were in our past estimating. We, have an ongoing conversation about staffing levels being below full staffing and having some financial capacity as a result of that. But as a percentage, our estimates were pretty accurate. When you think about how much we're spending in terms of personnel expense, even that 4% makes a dollar difference that is can be significant.
All right. Looking at the historical full-time salary actuals, we are looking at just the general fund. This closely follows all the funds chart, so you can kind of see it progress up from 2020. The general fund represents about 79% of total funds. And as you can see, it closely again follows with the 23 projection again being projected as of the end of May, coming in at 21.7 million. Now, we took out the general funds just so this chart could be a little more visually appealing. As you can see, the funds have closely mimicked the general fund as well as the overall funds. And we did do a 23 projection as well. All of them have increased as expected. We do have 2 funds that did decrease for our projection for 23, which are golf, and this is the result of an employee that was a city employee half the year in 22 and is now being paid outside of the city for 23. And then also we have the central garage where we lost 2 longtime employees last year, and we've had some vacancies in this fund.
Yeah, and the golf side, that's the First Tee program. They were running payroll through us previously, and their director, they're paying directly now. So
Correct.
still providing the staff and providing the programming, just being accounted for differently.
Correct. As we move on, we want to look at historical overtime. Overtime is substantially found in both the police and fire departments. We can see how in 2022 it did start increasing a little bit more than the previous years. And as we look at the other funds off to the right, that chart off to the right, these are not big dollars, but it obviously stands out. We have the sanitation employees that had to cover positions at the recycling center, which has caused some overtime in the sanitation fund. And again, for the general fund projection, we're projecting it to be just under $2 million for 2023. As we move on to the next chart, historical COLA and merits. This chart represents the city's historical cost of living adjustment and merit projections. We have fluctuated in the past, back in 2005, 2006 era, at 9% total, and we've gone down to 2021 where there was 0% in both COLA and merit. We will see in our projections, well, January 2023, we did a 4% merit and 3% COLA, and as we will progress here in the study session, we will see some projections with the flip of that. It'll be 3% merit and 4% COLA. That is not telling you that's the way we're doing this. This is just how we did some of the assumptions, so you can start seeing some numbers.
I will add, sorry, Natalie Fisher, HR Director.
And is your mic on?
Oh. Natalie Fisher, HR Director, is that on now? The light was on. There we go.
There it goes.
Yeah.
Okay. Natalie Fisher, HR Director. I will add, you might recall last September we did a pay plan implementation percentage increase. It really doesn't fit into a cost of living or the merit, but just to make sure that you recall that as of September, we did have a 2% across the organization. It doesn't fit in this graph, but we did have it.
And 2% was the minimum. It was
Correct.
actually in response to the pay plan assessment of individual positions. So every employee got adjusted at least 2%, and then others more than that, depending on where they were relative to the market.
Correct.
When it comes to merit, does pretty much everybody get the full merit? Or how does that break
Yeah.
out?
So currently we do have a performance-based approach. Annually, depending upon, in the years that we're fortunate enough to offer the merit increases, we develop a system on ratings. Certain ratings equate to a percentage. For example, overall outstanding this year would equate to a 4%. And then depending upon, it goes down to a 3.5%, or a 3%, or a 2.5%, or 2% would be the lowest if someone qualifies for that merit. I will also say, even though we say January of 2023, anytime we have those merit increases, those are going to be applied at the annual anniversary date for the employee. So those impacts don't take the entire year. they are distributed throughout the year on either the 1st or the 16th of the month.
So combining those two, we typically budget half, in terms of a percentage. If it were a 3% merit, we'd budget 1.5%.
Correct. Yep, so, for example, in the past when we have really scrutinized and jumped in and tried to look at exactly when someone's merit has been applied, in the event the overall would be up to 3%, that doesn't mean every employee is receiving a 3%. The average might be 2.25% across the organization. From a budget perspective, we budget for half the maximum, and we come out pretty close on the impacts.
All right. Moving on to the staffing level comparison. This chart is showing the city's staffing level at a point in time, and we took these numbers of classified full-time people during the second quarter of each of these years. The blue area represents filled positions, and the orange area is authorized positions but vacant. And we can see here, again, in September of 2022 is when our pay plan was incorporated. We are still, between 22 and 23, we are still running approximately 13.9% vacant. And you got to always take that with a grain of salt because it changes almost on a daily basis. So as you can see, back in 2019, we were operating a lot more cleaner with 6.7% open positions. And Natalie will touch base on this just a little bit more here coming up. The next slide represents the inflation. We wanted to throw this in here just so everybody can have a visual of what we are dealing with COLAs and merits. This represents the consumer price index for the Midwest region and represents the monthly change in prices for U.S. consumers of pulling the most popular types of items and consumer products. So if we look at this, we look at April 23, it's at 4.9%. This is the smallest increase since April of 21. But what that represents is in April of 23, consumer prices were 4.9% higher than April of 22.
Okay, you said 21 earlier, so you meant 22. Yeah.
But that 4.9% is the lowest increase. The 4.9% is the lowest increase the consumer price index has had since April of 2021.
Oh, so going back another year even.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's always been increasing. So this is the lowest it's been in April of 23. And you will see here there are two different lines. They do take out food and energy just to show the difference because food and energy are more volatile. They fluctuate more often. All right, Natalie is going to take over the next few slides and describe our budget approach for this year.
Okay. So I'll start with the broad approach in looking at all of our departments. We analyze vacancies back to 2020. So we looked at the levels of positions we had filled, which roles were vacant. From 2020 to 2023, we then took a look to say, okay, so what was going on here? Were there some anomalies? We did have departments that were impacted by furloughs and during COVID, so we accounted for those, and then we came up with a number for each one of those to say, okay, here was the average, or here's what we anticipate based on what we know at this point that we would be comfortable this being the trend going forward. Then we took a look at those departments that had the higher turnover. We honed in on them where the largest number of vacancies, either from a turnover perspective as well as those that we weren't fortunate enough to have the turnover because we didn't successfully get people into those roles, and we dug even deeper. And I will say, too, from that approach, we looked at those positions, and then we tried to cluster by like roles or similar functions or divisions, rather than just treating, for example, at the police department, every single position is the same. We did try to isolate and cluster, so we were comparing like roles as we looked at the turnover. We also had to keep in mind that when we had retirements and promotions, that in doing so, it smoothed our numbers a little bit, because you have the vacancy, then you have a promotion, and then it's a domino effect of the other roles. There might be a promotion there as well, if that makes sense. So I'm moving to slide number 11 on the position overview. Again, I've said we looked at the 4 departments that were being impacted the most with the vacancies: Parks and Rec, Police Department, Public Works, and Utilities. We looked not only at those roles and the trend that was happening, but we also honed in to say, okay, so what's happened since the pay plan? And really the department that has seemed to benefit the most at this point in time is Parks and Rec. We've seen to really lessen those vacancies and cut down on the turnover there, although it hasn't been that long. And we feel like we're making a little bit of progress in the other areas. It's just not as much.
Are we talking solely full-time, or is that full-time and part-time?
This is full-time.
Okay.
Correct. So based on all of those clustered divisions, roles, trends, we put that together, took a look, and developed a percentage that we were comfortable with for each department. And that is what is itemized on the staffing level assumptions page. Once we had that percentage developed, that is the percentage of that is the percentage of all allocated percentages. Let me restate that. That is the percentage of all allocated positions if we had filled them, and then the budget numbers behind that were applied.
So, Rick, now I need to make sure my mic's on. Rick may touch on this a little bit more later, but we essentially said, okay, here's our assumptions going forward. Tasked Rick with then diving into each department, looking at the staffing of those departments, and saying when we're dealing with them at the department level, if this department was staffed at 96%, figure out what 100% is, then figure out what 96% is, and that's our budget. On the ones that were more detailed, tasked him with going in and saying, not only are we talking about a departmental level assumption, but if we assumed these levels of vacancies in these positions, then what would that 100% budget look like, and what would the estimated occupancy budget look like? So using that historical data and then using that level of detail at either the department or the division level is how we then came up with our baseline personnel expenses for the estimate for 2024. That doesn't include COLAs, merits. That's just, here's our baseline if we stayed staffed and wages stayed the same for 2024.
I will add, moving on to the additional personnel expenses, those assumptions were just the wage part. Then we have to make sure we're accounting for the taxes associated with those, and unemployment, and CAPERS, KPNF, life insurance. What we did was capture those items that are specifically a function of the payroll dollars. So what you don't see here that we'll deal with at a later date, health insurance, workers' compensation, they're a little bit different because of, first of all, the nature of health insurance in general, and then also because work comp does have to do with payroll, the way we function, but depending upon the jobs that people are in is going to impact how we go about that. It's going to cost us more to insure a police officer than it would be someone that is primarily primarily clerical in nature that sits at the desk all day. So those items were not included as a percentage, but those are listed here. And then total at the bottom, because they are treated differently. Our sworn public safety, these would be all of our police officers and firefighters, and any of the sworn management also, the supervisors and up at the the police department level. Those are all individuals that are members of KPNF. That is the Kansas Police and Fire retirement system. Those rates are higher. They're a different retirement system within the CAPERS system. So the rates for those individuals are different. However, if you add those together, they do not pay in Social Security. So police and fire pay KPNF. They do not pay Social Security. Therefore, the city doesn't have to pay Social Security on them. And then all other of our full-time employees are members of the CAPERS system. It's a lower retirement percentage that we pay in for each payroll dollar, but they do pay Social Security and Medicare. So that's why we're not able to take just the total salary dollars and apply the percentage, because depending upon the role impacts which percentage we need to account for, and Rick has taken care of that in his other estimations.
Are those expenses included in the full-time salary results? Is that part of that?
They will be here
26
next.
million, yeah?
They will be next.
Okay.
As we continue on. How you doing?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So to this point, as we flip over to the total personnel cost, to this point, we've added our basic wages, and then Natalie has talked about the other benefits and other costs with an employee. Now we're going to look at what is the total package. This total personnel costs slide that you're looking at, we are doing the assumptions of 4% COLA and 3% merit as a base. And finance calculates this total personnel costs using a worksheet with very detailed formulas throughout it. As we look here, now we're adding part-time classified, part-time seasonal into our budget. And at the 4% COLA and 3% merit, that total is $40.7 million. If you break this down, wages themselves, that bucket is 83%, and then all of the other taxes and benefits and everything else is an approximate 17%. And to the right there, you can see this is kind of a base. If we did 0 merit, 0 COLA, our cost in 2024 would be $38.7 million. So to take this a little bit further, on the next slide for the 24 projections, we have a few explanations of how the personnel budget changes with various scenarios. Again, we start off with the 2024 no COLA, no merit. And if we were just to do that, the increase over this year would be approximately 2.5%.
And that's attributable to our staffing assumptions.
That it's assumptions and any of that could be benefits that have increased a little bit, but mostly as staffing assumptions. If we break this down, we can kind of look, this is a guideline. This is not a true scientific number to go by, but if we break this down a little bit, if we add 1% COLA, that's going to add about $372,000. If we add 1% merit, that is about $179,000. And this goes back to what Natalie was describing with the merits, that those are based on the anniversary date of the hire. So we can take approximately 50% of the merit. And that third column, we have the 4% COLA and 3% merit coming up to 40.7, and that is an approximately 5.3% increase over prior year, over 2023. And at this point, we don't have to do this now, but we do have the opportunity. Scott has a spreadsheet open that we can run other scenarios for you. It'll go real quick. Just tell us a merit, just tell us a COLA, and we can come up with a balance. If you'd like to do that, or we could just take suggestions and do them offline and give you a rundown of quite a few scenarios.
Yeah, and Commissioners, I offer you a little bit more explanation. Staff had a very detailed table that was kind of confusing with all the different scenarios, and the 4%, 3% was at my suggestion in part. We did 3% COLA, 4% merit last year for essentially a total of 7%. As we looked at CPI, at the moment, it's hovering a little bit over 4%. And then with respect to COLA versus merit, I think one of the takeaways from the pay plan was just keeping up with the market and not having done a salary survey and not having made pay plan adjustments. We found ourselves falling behind the market. The pay plan did acknowledge that position by position, we did a decent job of hiring in above the starting of the pay range to kind of try to keep up with the market. But as you know, a COLA adjustment adjusts the starting pay range and adjusts the pay range and keeps our pay plan moving, where a merit is just applicable on a review basis for the current employees. So my emphasis was to kind of put a little bit more emphasis on COLA, and we certainly can provide you additional information about COLA. One other thing that I think is worth sharing, as I think you know, there's a city manager listserv that city managers can post questions, and it starts a dialogue online. And about a week and a half ago, I don't even remember which city manager, but someone posted, "Hey, what's everybody thinking about COLAs and merits?" And so there's a handful of responses. I wouldn't necessarily call them peer communities. It's Abilene, Columbus, Concordia, Derby, Ellsworth, Heston, Iola, Junction City, Kingman, Larned, Lindsborg, McPherson, Mound Ridge, and Wamego. And it varies. Just looking at the totals, it varies from 4 to 7%, a handful 5, 6, 7, and then some of them started waxing philosophical about how they feel about merits and COLAs and all of that. The other thing I would tell you is none of those numbers or responses, I don't think, are governing body decisions. It's all just kind of dialogue that's happening at the city management level at the moment.
Do you have any idea if any of those are considering staying revenue neutral?
I do not. That's probably a likely conversation will spark up here pretty quick as well. But that's a little bit more, community specific. But it wouldn't surprise me if there's some of that conversation as well.
When we did the pay plan and, looked at our salaries, do we just look at other municipalities, or did we look at other industries to kind of see where we fell? I can't remember 100%.
Yes. So the pay plan consultant shared that they do have access to a database, that they do factor in what's going on in the private market. They didn't have a specific formula of how that was brought in, but they did have access to it, and they did consider some of that data in the positions. I would have to go back and look specifically if it was across the board or if it was only in those roles where we deemed we were competing more so with the private sector than other municipalities, which a lot of our roles that is the case, or if it was areas where they couldn't find comparables. So then they relied on digging into some of that data.
Obviously, police fire wouldn't have, it'd all be municipalities, but engineering and CDL drivers and clerical and all that, you not only have to look at other municipalities, but,
Right.
other industries.
So we have some information today about what the school system is going to do. Do we know, have a way to know what major employers or other institutions are doing? A hospital or Great Plains or?
I do not. I've not polled them. I think I shared with some of you that, over time, we kind of set our pay range once for the year and go forward. And as an employer trying to compete for some of those positions, it's noticeable to me that other private sector, they put a sign out front, now hiring at this wage, and if that doesn't work, it seems like they just raise it a dollar an hour until they fill their positions. We are not that flexible. We have a whole pay plan. We have compression to take into account, but that is something that motivates me, is just trying to have enough of a COLA to not regress in terms of competing for those employees. And Natalie, correct me if I'm wrong, but for classified positions, we essentially start at $15.76 an hour at the moment, as a reference point. We've got quite a few positions in the $15 to $18, $19 range. And as I said, part of what we have to deal with is compression between not necessarily identical positions, but how do they fit into the hierarchy of the organization.
The other disadvantage we're at when attempting to assess what other employers are paying, unless they are a public employer, most of them are not compelled to share.
Yeah.
Whereas
That's a
we
good
don't
point.
have that luxury. We have our information and it is public.
Well, and I think this kind of falls back on a comment that Mr. Scragg made about, we can hire now and be competitive, but when you look at some of our positions that have been here for a significant amount of time, you were sitting here looking at, okay, September we gave them a 2%, maybe a little more increase, plus, we did the 3-4, and we're looking at doing a 4-3, which sounds like a lot, but you've got to look back and see that 5 out of 7 years we gave 0. So even if that was a 2, that puts you 10% behind on somebody that's been here has not had a raise, for 5 out of 7 years. So I'm guessing that, our pay plan maybe didn't get us to where we wanted to be. I'm thinking it just got us closer to where we wanted to be, if I remember right.
Yep, I think it is just one step in what we need to be doing, and not to derail this conversation, but in the coming weeks, you will be considering some policy changes that we are going to propose for your review. Some of it did tie specifically into pay plan recommendations. Others recommendations are based on employee feedback and recommendations, and then just overall management. So, I think the specific pay itself is just one component, but we have some other things that we are working on that will be brought
But having
back.
said that, I don't want to leave you with the impression that we can do nothing on pay and these other things are a solution. It all kind of goes together in terms of our compensation package. Some of the things that will be coming forward are leave, how we bring people on, new employees on with leave, shift differential, looking at, we currently pay that in certain instances and broadening that. Some of the things that the employees had raised going into the pay plan, and the pay plan confirmed that these are other policy decisions that can impact retention, recruitment and retention, essentially.
It might just be me, but I think the overarching opinion of the commission has been that we want to be more competitive in the marketplace. Thus the reason for the pay plan adjustments. So I think all this information is really valuable. I mean, we want to continue to take steps in that direction. So.
Yeah, and Natalie kind of touched on it, but I'll be more frank. The pay plan probably got us competitive, but it has not closed our hiring gap. We may have seen some incremental progress in certain positions, but recruitment is still a high priority challenge for us.
With the cost of living increases, does the starting base pay move with that each time?
Yes, good question. So what will happen when we have a cost of living adjustment, it moves every one of our pay grades and all of our salary schedules at whatever that percentage is. So 1576, if we would have a 3% cost of living adjustment, then that is moved 3% along with every other minimum and maximum pay, that the entire range gets moved.
So, and that reminds me too, Commissioner Ryan, you mentioned the school district's pay plan information that was in the paper today. So they raised $1,500. They have a pay schedule with steps, so years of service you move through the steps. But they raised their starting base to $42,000, which was an increase by $1,500. So I calculate that as a 3.57% increase in the base.
I took it to be they were at 42 and were
Yeah.
increasing at 15, so I was calling it 4.5, 5. So
Yeah, and I ran the math twice. I think it is they were at 42 and going up 1,500. But then the other question is, what's the percentage difference between their steps? And we're trying to
and they
gather
had
that.
compensating days and a number of
Yeah,
other
right, they
factors
had-
that would, yeah.
Yep. So sorry to interrupt, Commissioner Longbine.
So the other side of that is that merit is just a one-time cost, but the COLA is across the board and continues.
A merit is a cost for the tenure of the employee, so they keep it and build on it each year as they get additional merits. But yes, it doesn't adjust the pay plan, and as we have turnover, then it may ebb and flow. But one of the things we struggle with is having a competitive pay rate to hire people in. So we'll advertise, and this is a conversation we have frequently, depending on the position and the difficulty of hiring it, what hiring range do we advertise when we put a position out? The hope with the pay plan was, we could be closer to the starting pay rate, but we still find ourselves having to use that starting rate and advertise some type of range.
Where do you try to recruit? What methods or media, or is it all online?
So we have, it's a wide variety. We do our website. We do physical postings in the building. We send to a number of universities. We send to a number of community outlets. We do still advertise in the Salina Journal. We do some social media. Channel
Do you ever
20.
do job fairs?
We occasionally do some job fairs. We have tossed around the idea of having our very own. That might be some approach we take. I will say, just as a sidebar, the last few job fairs that I've attended, the employers outweighed the attendees in numbers, which is a sign of the times. It's beyond competitive.
Trade
We
publications.
use, trade publications, sometimes print, but most of the time it's going to be on those professional job boards. For example, anything from APWA to the American Planning Association. Those, when we're looking at some of those higher level professional technical, they typically have their own professional organizations. We've advertised through Strategic Government Resources, which they do recruitment for fees, but they also just have job boards available. League of Kansas Municipalities, I'm sure I'm forgetting some, but, and then, I look, is it Channel 20 that runs our job
the PEG channel?
postings? Yep, they'll scroll through there.
Indeed.
What's that?
The police department, I know in the past, they have been pretty active going to colleges and stuff. Are they still doing that?
Yes, they will also go to military bases. I know Chief Weiss and a sergeant or two recently went to Haskell Indian College in Lawrence as an example. So a variety of different places, local here as well, local colleges, junior colleges, and they will, it's not just limited to what HR does. They do have individuals that are actively recruiting specific to the police department as well.
Okay.
All right. As we move on, Debbie Pack, Finance Director, will walk us through the remaining couple slides here.
Thank you, Rick. Debbie Pack, Director of Finance. So slide 16, what we did was we tried to put all this together in perspective from an overall global look at things. So what we took was we kind of established and we've talked to you kind of where we are on the revenues and the estimating of the revenues for 2024. We took those numbers and we took what Rick and the other projected numbers were for 2023 expenses. And we kind of compared those to kind of create a margin of what we thought was available for additional spending beyond the 2023 projection. This does not include that 2.5% that Rick mentioned just in the last slide as far as staffing and that adjustment. It does not include anything that the departments have requested for 2024. This is strictly based on what we're projecting is going to happen in the rest of 2023. So from this slide, you can see the general fund has a margin of about $6 million. You can see some of the other funds either have positive or negative projection or margins depending on what our revenue projections are and what their projected expenses could be for the end of the year. So we thought it was important to see kind of how much we had to play with in order to kind of balance this budget for the 2024 season. So I think Mike may have some additional because he was.
No, I think Debbie described it pretty well. And I think we'll get to it here in a little bit, but our thinking was if we can get some general direction, and recognizing that could be subject to change, but if we can get some general direction on COLA and merits, then we can go back to the rest of the budget requests that we have, expenditure requests, and say, if we're going to bring you a balanced budget, what do we have remaining to work with, and start making those expenditure decisions. I would say, too, we have additional staffing requests that are not part of any of this. We wanted to just deal with baseline staffing and COLA and merit, and then we know that remainder that we have to work with to make those remaining decisions to bring you a balanced budget.
Is the 2024 budgeted revenue, what makes that number up? Is that sales tax?
Depends on
property tax?
which fund it is. So for the general fund, it would be our property tax or sales tax.
That's what I'm sorry, I was looking at the general fund. It
Yeah,
would help if I
property
told
tax,
you.
sales tax, franchise fees. We kind of
And-
touched on those a couple of weeks ago.
So that's with the 6% increase in sales tax that we
Yes.
talked about? And
Yes.
is that with?
Revenue neutral rate.
That is a revenue neutral rate to follow up
Yep.
Commissioner Ryan's comment. Okay.
Yes. Yep.
Thank you.
Yep.
And so, I don't know if you have a summary slide, but back a few slides, you can see that the personnel expense increase in the general fund, and that's not the only fund we manage, but it's the biggest one for sure. The personnel cost increase is estimated to be essentially $2 million compared to that $6.1 million number in the slide that we're on slide 16. So if we proceeded with 4% COLA, 3% merit, factored in all the other ancillary personnel costs that go along with that, we essentially would have $4 million left to apply to the rest of the expenditure request in the general fund.
And that's all contingent upon, obviously, as we talked about, the 6% increase in sales tax.
Correct. The other big variable in all this, and Natalie touched on it just a little bit, is health insurance cost. And we've had a great run of experience in terms of our employees and been able to maintain our health insurance costs with the conversations going on with Salina Regional and the Blue Cross Blue Shield. I don't have any insider information, but from everything I've seen, I think it's a foregone conclusion we're going to see a cost increase. It's just a question of how much of a cost increase. The only way the only scenario that we don't see a significant cost increase, in my estimation, is if somehow Blue Cross Blue Shield prevails entirely and just doesn't agree to any rate adjustments.
And we won't know how those negotiations go until after we put our budget together.
Well, I hope to have more information, but I don't know that we'll have the final information from either one of the parties. I have done quite a bit of number crunching with the help of our insurance consultant. I have put questions to Blue Cross Blue Shield and Salina Regional, starting to get some return emails from them and just starting to have that dialogue. I think if I can get some answers to some of those questions, we can have a more informed opinion of what our cost increase might be. But I do expect there to be one. And as I mentioned before, kind of the worst case scenario is if you just use some real rough generalities, our $1.7 million of 2022 experience could go up 2.17 times, and could represent another 1.9. I do think that's the absolute worst case scenario, and I don't think it's specific to our actual experience procedure by procedure that our insureds had in 2022, and we're trying to dial into that level of detail. So I think it'll come down from that number, but it's something that will certainly factor into these budget discussions.
If we miraculously had an influx of people and say cut our employment deficit from 14%, cut that in half, do we have the cushion built in somewhere to absorb all that?
If we would miraculously hire 100% of our employees, we would not have budgeted 100% employees. We would have the cushion in our fund balance so that if it became necessary, we could do a budget amendment in 2024 to cover that additional cost of employment.
But if we cut that
But
deficit,
historically, we're not seeing that, and that's
Right.
why we're,
Right. And so that's the immediate reaction, is we could rely on reserves, and then we'd have to, that would be a new normal for us to budget to, and we'd have to make adaptations in future budget years to get back in balance.
Right. Does that make sense to you?
yeah, I'm thinking probably the biggest impact would be if we got the police department 100% staffed. We would have to do it.
Right.
And
Yeah.
Certainly.
And we haven't given up. I don't want you to think this budget is giving up on that as a goal. In fact, the police department in particular knows you just keep hiring and we'll figure it out. It's not as if these are budget numbers, but they are not limitations on hiring. They are authorized at a higher number. We just know historically we haven't been able to hit those numbers.
And typically what we see happen is they may get to 100% and then someone else will fall short somewhere else. So there'll be a little bit of savings somewhere else, or their overtime will go down because they've now hired a full range of employee, where we're budgeting to have their overtime on this level of 85% or whatever that number may be. So we're anticipating that number to be fairly high based on the fact that they don't have full staffing.
Yeah, overtime's a really good point. It won't be a one-for-one savings. I mean, if we get fully staffed, that doesn't mean overtime goes to zero. But as you saw, that number is significant, and it has been growing significantly.
I'm not a negative kind of guy. I'm an optimist, but I hear $2 million for staffing, $2 million possible health care, $2 million for the full staffing scenario, so that 6 goes away pretty fast if all of those things would happen.
And I think you all know me well enough to know I'm a fiscal conservative, but we have a number of years of being conservative in terms of our revenue estimating and conservative in our expense estimating, which has gotten us to where we are with our fund balances. I do feel like we have more flexibility now than we've ever had to kind of be reactive rather than, I think I kind of joked with some of you, we used to budget out of fear that if we were at full staffing, we'd bounce a check somewhere. We now have enough reserve that we can respond to a downturn in the economy or staffing levels exceeding budget. In the past, it was too tight for that.
And I will mention, too, that the health insurance discussion is not all general fund. As the employees are spread across some of those other funds, they're going to take whatever percentage of hit those might be. I'm not sure what it is, Natalie, what percentage of employees are in the general fund. I'm guessing 80. I mean, it's pretty significant.
Yeah,
But
I can't remember.
But there is
specific-
some of those dollars that would not necessarily flow into the general fund as an
Gotcha.
expense. So. Okay. So then what we wanted to present to you, because we've kind of talked about, here's the cost of personnel, here's what we're projecting, and here's kind of where that margin is. This last section is what actually has been requested without personnel, because those are kind of what the calculations we've had. So in the general fund, you can see that the requested total is about $14.4 million. without personnel again, which is about a $1.9 million increase over the 2023 budget, or about a 15.1% increase over the 2023 budget. Also calculating it's about a 21.4% increase over what we actually spent in 2022 in these categories for the general fund. In our arts and humanities, that increases about $10,000 over the 2023 budget, which is about a 2.2% increase over the 2023 budget, about 12.2% over the 2022 actual. Sanitation is about a 9.8% increase over 2023, or about $227,000. I will mention for this particular one, you'll see a lot of that's in the capital line item. That is part of the part of that request is the whole tree trimming program that they've brought to you before, where the sanitation department, the parks department are going to work together to do a community tree trimming program. That part of that request is some of the equipment for that. So depending on how we move forward with that, that number could change. So I just wanted to kind of point some of these things out as I knew they were specific projects. On the next slide, you can see solid waste this looks horrible, but 165%. This is a discussion we've been having for years about how we have this fund balance in here, and it really shouldn't be in the operating fund. So what we've done in the 2024 budget is we've budgeted a transfer out of this operating fund into the capital reserve fund, which then can be used for capital equipment purchases, closure, post-closure costs, and those types of things, so that we can get the operating fund to a more realistic fund balance and get that funding where we need to have it, which is capital. And that's the intent of that balance. So that's why it looks like it's gone up a lot. That current budgeted transfer is about $6 million. So if you take that number out, they probably are flat in their request for 2024. The golf course is up about $42,000, or 11.9% over 2023 budget. And some of these things, what we're seeing is the cost of chemicals and those types of things are causing us to believe that we need to request some additional funding for those items. The wastewater plant is up about 6.9% from 2023, about 43% above 2022 actual, about $1.5 million. Again, a lot of that increase comes in maintenance items, so supplies of maintenance items for hydrants and meters and those types of things. We're seeing a significant increase in those dollars. The central garage is requesting about 16.9% increase over 2023, about 24% over 2022. The large number in that is the fuel site upgrade, which is about $125,000. We'll probably be bringing that to you in the next few weeks as a 2023 item. So that probably will come out of this budget to bring that down to a little bit less of an increased request. And like I said, this is what the departments have increased. So basically what'll happen next for us on that last slide, Scott, is that we're gonna, whatever direction you give us today as far as where we wanna kind of go with COLAs and merits, we're gonna plug those numbers into these budgets, these budget dollar requests, and then we're gonna refine what that calculation is for the capacity of each of those funds. And then staff's going to have to go back and review their expense request and determine whether we need to tile those back, if there's things in there that we really need to take out, because as we went through them initially, there are things that have already come out, but we didn't take them out of these numbers. But there's some things that we've already had those discussions and said, that's not something that's our priority now. So we're going to have to also then review, as Mike mentioned, there's some requests for additional staffing. So staff's going to have to look at those requests and see what our appropriate staffing levels are. We'll have to return to you with a proposed balanced budget, and then we'll have to have some further discussions about have we taken into all of this some of the strategic planning priorities that you gave us a couple months ago, and have some decisions about how we're going to utilize some of these fund balances that we have. So that's kind of where we're going in the next steps. In the next few weeks, we'll start having some of those conversations. So I think at this point, I think Mike probably wants to have a discussion about where you want us to go as far as those COLAs and merits, and whether you want that to be different scenarios or how you want us to incorporate that into the kind of initial draft budget that we'll be bringing back to you.
Debbie, real quick, you asked about what percentage of our employees are general fund currently with our staffing levels, 78%. 78% are in
So-
the general fund.
So about 80% of that
Yep.
health fund, well, if everybody was sick equally, that would equal that. But just so you knew, that was the number, so. So do you have any questions for any of us about the information that we provided you? I know there's a lot there. And like I said, I think Mike probably wants to lead you in a conversation about that.
I guess we don't hear until the 15th about how the county has evaluated property, but
Well, we got
where's
the
our
number.
evaluation?
We did get the number last week. I can tell you that the increase, and this is all off my head, which is not always the best, I believe it's a 6.9% increase in valuation. It was 6 something, I can't remember exactly what it was. A little over $503 million, I think, was the total valuation without TIF included in there. So it's about a 6% increase in valuation.
Our mill levy's 32.
Our current mill levy is 30.4-ish, and the revenue neutral rate that we got from the county is 28.5, I think, somewhere in the 28-something range. We'll be having that, I'll be bringing that all back to you in 2 weeks with the details of all that, but that's what I can remember off the top of my head.
Thank you.
But as we've mentioned, everything that we've done in here is the assumption that that number doesn't change. So if that number changes, that obviously increases our margin just a little bit.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
yep.
I don't know that I have a whole lot to add other than whatever consensus you can reach or whatever direction you can provide, specifically with respect to COLAs and merits, would be helpful as we describe the process going forward. If you have questions about staffing or staffing assumptions, be happy to try to answer those as well. Having said all that, if you're not there and you want scenarios, you want additional information, we're certainly happy to do that as well. But if we can get personnel dialed in, then that helps us go back and review all the other expenditure-related budget requests and start bringing balanced budget into focus.
When we talk about personnel expense, we discuss this, it's what, 70 to 80% of our budget, total budget?
Just short of 75%, I think.
Okay.
About 75%.
The COLA is like, it's just like a basic, we call it COLA, but for everybody, it's a basic raise. So I get that raise and that continues to build. Explain how that merit works again. You said something about how somebody can build on that merit.
Well,
I was
sure.
I was taken back a little bit by that.
I think Commissioner Ryan's comment was the merit is a one-time expense. But if you're an employee and you get a merit this year and you stay employed with us for 10 more years and you get more merits, that expense will continue as long as you're employed with us. So I'm not saying that any better than the first time, I don't
Not
think.
to me. No, I'm still.
But
Well,
essentially,
it accumulates.
You're
So
right.
if
Reevaluate.
if today I'm making $1,000 a month and I get a 1% COLA, I'm going to be making $1,100, whatever those numbers might
I
be.
get that.
And then next year, if I get another 1%, it's going to add on to the 11.
That's on the
So
COLA.
Yeah,
on the
that-
COLA. The same with the merit. It's no different with the merit. The only difference is that the COLA comes on January 1st, and it comes to every employee. Doesn't matter where you're at in the pay range, doesn't matter whatever. Every employee gets a COLA. The merit, however, there's two stipulations. If you're already at the top of your pay range, you don't have access to another merit because the pay range is this amount. So once I'm here, if we don't move that with a COLA, I'm always here because my merit doesn't get me anywhere. But it does add to my pay, so that the next year goes on top of what I made this year. So it's not a one-time expense. It's a one-time improvement to my pay, but it still accumulates.
Yeah, it's not a
Not
bonus.
like a bonus, which
Yeah,
is one
see,
pay.
yeah.
It's
it
a
goes
percentage.
away.
As an employee, if you earn a merit, your pay rate will be adjusted. That'll be your new pay rate. You don't lose that and start over at the end of the calendar year. As long as you stay employed, you can keep that pay rate, and as long as we make provision for additional merits, you could earn additional merits year
And
after
your
year.
COLA and your
only-
merit goes on top of that every year.
The only difference between a COLA and a merit is if you're at the top of your pay range, you can max out on your merit and not on the COLA.
Correct.
Correct.
Correct. And depending upon performance, some employees might not qualify for that merit increase.
Yeah.
Did the pay plan address, as a concern I had heard, that people have been here 20 years, never topped out in their pay grade? Is the merits raises occur, how often do they occur?
Annually.
It's just
If
annual?
you approve them.
Well,
If
if you go back to that chart, Scott, if you can go back to that slide, I mean, COLAs and merits are an annual decision as part of our budget.
Right.
And so there were years there, 2009, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, and 15, that there were no COLA budgeted.
But a brand-new employee is not going to get a merit raise until their one-year anniversary, is that correct?
Right.
Generally
well,
speaking, yes.
we
Why
do
I
have
say
provision.
generally is for employees that are given a 6-month probationary evaluation, so everyone with the exception of police officers, firefighters, and dispatchers, those employees that I just mentioned have a 12-month probationary period. Everyone else has 6-month. So at their 6-month evaluation, in the event their performance ranks high enough, like an outstanding, then the department might opt to award them with the early merit, which is really just, it's almost like an advance. It's half of what that merit could be, and then at the annual, they would be eligible to get the remainder of it. So, but generally speaking, set aside the potential for that early merit increase. Yes, the point in time at which someone is eligible for a merit increase will be at their annual evaluation date or anniversary date.
Well, I think in a future pay study, when you compare the municipalities or private industry, you ought to look at how they do it. Because I think, you know, well, 1 year between raises is, for someone starting out, I think that's a big complaint I've heard, is it takes 20, 25 years to hit the top of the scale.
Okay, so, and I did hear some of those concerns as well. Particularly, I think the concerns were raised at our police department. The structure of our current pay plan is, and I don't have the percentage in front of me, but for the sake of discussion, I'm going to say approximately 55% from minimum to maximum. So by design, it is going to take someone several years to reach that maximum. There are two different schools of thought. Some employees like to be able to not be topped out. Some employees see it that they should be topped out in a much shorter period of time. That is a design difference in our pay plan. Some municipalities, it might take someone 7 years to reach the maximum to top out, but they're not going to have that very wide range of 55 or 60% from minimum to maximum. It's going to be much less.
Well, I think it just needs to be factored in with the staying competitive with industry and other jobs.
So not necessarily the amount, but the frequency of.
Yes.
Yeah, and I can't, well, not necessarily disagreeing with that. It really becomes a function of what is the top. In my mind, the first indicator of equity is the merit, the raises we're giving on an annual basis, COLA and merit, so that each employee is getting an opportunity for a pay increase. Then it's the breadth of the range, and you know, if the top end's out far enough, and you continue to get COLAs and merits, that's probably equitable. I think our difficulty came in those years where we budgeted for none, and we just kept, and our pay plan fell behind, and our employees' pay rates didn't go up, and so to really look at the top end, I think we have to look at the breadth of the range, and we have to look at what COLAs and merits were given on an annual basis. But I understand your point. We don't. For whatever reason, we don't want our employees to fall behind the market, and we don't want to fall behind the market.
And I don't want them to get discouraged and
Right.
and you know, get an offer somewhere else.
And so I'm repeating myself, but part of the reason that I placed more emphasis on the COLA was to get that started, to make the pay range adjustment, not just the individual pay adjustments for employees, and then still have the opportunity for merit raises as well. But if we fall back into kind of our old ways of no COLAs, recruitment continues to be a problem, and we're not keeping up.
Well, if your ear's tuned to opinion, here's mine. I'm fine with what the staff is recommending. I mean, I think if that's what you feel is going to keep us from falling back, then I'm all on board with that. I think the whole, the gist of this for me is to keep us competitive. So possibly you could argue this isn't enough or it's too little, but if you guys have a better sense of where it'll fit than probably I do. I really don't have a sense of how to gauge the marketplace and what our competition is doing to us. We've had the revenue neutral conversation that there's really no way to compensate ourselves for inflation except to not be revenue neutral. And, you know, anything tomorrow is going to cost more than it does today. So we've got it seems like a poor general policy if we're going to go down the road of trying to be revenue neutral all the time. I mean, there must be some middle ground there. If we've got a 31% mill rate, and I can tell the public we reduced it by a mill or mill and a half, I'd be perfectly comfortable with saying it was reduced rather than being at revenue neutral. But that's just me. We got 4 other commissioners here.
Commissioner Davis?
But all of these are basically compound interest. And as long as our growth in income or revenue over the next couple of years is going to keep up with it, there's no problem. Or the percentage of our revenue that goes for non-employee wages is gonna drop. That's why we just have to keep capturing the growth in assessed value, which is probably need to start lobbying in Topeka to. I mean, it's easy to go to be not revenue neutral, but dissuade that type of thinking in the future.
And sales tax, just to be clear, sales tax growth is carrying us right now. That's how we're even having a conversation about being revenue neutral. Sales tax growth and reserve balances are what hedge against those concerns.
And the only piece of that bothers me is, that we've got a nice 6%, well, and then a whole lot of projections behind that at a half. Well, if we don't hit 6, that throws the whole chart off all the way down the line. That, in my opinion.
No, I think that's a fact. I don't know that that's an opinion. If we don't hit 6, that impacts all the budget projections.
Commissioner Longbine?
Well, I think property taxes, I'm in favor of staying revenue neutral. And, if need be, there's always a lot of waste in government. No one ever talks. I haven't heard any discussion about trying to cut expenses, and I know we got a cost improvement program. But I think there is places we could cut back. But we do need to take care of the people. And, as the housing pieces come together, our population is going to grow at some point. And I think revenue will grow with that. So hopefully those pieces start coming together soon. And
I agree with the first part of Commissioner Ryan's as far as I really don't have a good feel because I'm not in this industry as to what we need to do salary-wise, so I do have to trust staff. And if the 4-3 is what we need to do to be competitive, again, we're still understaffed, so obviously we're not overpaying. I guess would be a good way to put it. So as far as the revenue neutral, I want to see where we're at with the sales tax and and all that, and then we'll, if we do a year, but I agree with you, we can't be revenue neutral forever. It just wouldn't work, so we'll have to address that, and that's our next big
That's our next
decision to make.
study session.
Yeah, that's another study session,
Yep.
so we'll see how all this rounds out as we get everything.
But we've been able to increase our expenditures over the years because there was no such thing as revenue neutral.
Right.
I mean, the reason you grow is so that if you tax at the same rate, you get more money because you're taxing a larger base.
Yeah. Well, and I also think you grow, so your sales tax grows, and you put less, to me, again, that's the discussion, sales tax versus property tax. I like sales tax and the fact that if we're growing the population, there's less burden on property tax, and if we continue to have a good pull factor, we have people from out of county also, helping us to pay for our streets and everything. So I think let's look at the 4-3, and then we'll have that next hard discussion about the revenue neutral here in a week or two, I have a feeling. So
Just let me add, I'm always encouraged by my fellow commissioners' optimism.
thank you.
Is there anything else when we bring that conversation to you about revenue? You talked a lot about sales tax. Is it going to be helpful for us to bring you any additional information about sales tax, and as we have that kind of revenue neutral rate discussion?
Well, again, I think you've showed us a 6% increase and what that will do to our fund balance and what it allows us to do. Again, I think some of the things we're talking about, we're trying to level out some of our expenses over the upcoming years, which will help. I understand Commissioner Longbind's that, there's always the jokes about the waste in government spending, and I don't know if we have that, or if we do or we don't. I'm sure there's some somewhere, but I think we run fairly lean. Obviously, when I look at our staffing, and you look at a lot of our equipment, we haven't over-purchased equipment either, because a lot of our equipment has age on it. So there are some expenses we have now because we're trying to get brought up to where we need to be, and then hopefully level out over years to come. So,
And if we have let's say a 3 to 5 year golden window of opportunity to do that, I'd rather take advantage of it while the money is relatively easier to come by. Because then if we are linear, but we've already budgeted in essence for the next 20 years as far as equipment, it's a lot easier then to, make downward adjustments on revenue because we are even.
you just need to get out your crystal ball, and then we'll know what to look for. So that's kind of the big deal.
From
That's
staff's
why I don't like to
perspective-
touch that general fund reserve.
Well, from staff's perspective, we're trying to staff this through for you in kind of a methodical way and at a high level of detail. I certainly don't want to paint you into a corner in terms of revenue neutral, but I think we'll be able to bring to you at revenue neutral, here's what we could do, and then you can decide whether
If we want to capture that increase.
capture the
Yeah,
additional,
so.
and then
And what
obviously
that
we
number
can do
looks
more.
like.
Yeah, well, I appreciate the way staff's going about it and giving us options. I think it's.
And we don't get an award from the state because we were revenue neutral for 3 years in a row. Because if if inflation is 1% a year, we lose 1%
1% a
capacity
year.
every
Yep.
year, right?
I understand.
And that's not sustainable.
Yep. Okay. Do you have the information you
That's
need?
helpful. Yep, we got plenty of work to do between now and next meeting, but we do have a Monday off in between, so
Yeah, appreciate the
Will be
commissioner's input.
Juneteenth.
Oh,
Yeah.
I guess we do, okay.
Okay. We will be back here in about 15 minutes. Thank you. Okay, it is 4 o'clock. I will call the June 12th Salina City Commission meeting to order. I will first look to staff for confirmation the Kansas Open Meeting Act required notice has been properly provided.
Yes.
Thank you. With that, can we have roll call?
Mayor Hoppick,
Here.
Commissioner Davis,
Here.
Commissioner Lankowitz, Commissioner Longbine,
Here.
Commissioner Ryan.
Here.
Thank you. Will all those who are able please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silence? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay, that will lead us into awards and proclamations.
Item 3.1, recognition of the month of June 2023 as Elder Abuse Awareness Month in the city of Salina. Brandy Bohm, Domestic Violence and Elder Abuse Program Manager at DVAC, will read the proclamation.
Good afternoon.
Whereas, according to the National Council on Aging, 1 in 10 seniors in America experiences mistreatment or abuse, including domestic and sexual violence, financial exploitation, and neglect. And whereas abusers of older adults are both men and women and are usually family members, caregivers, healthcare workers, or other trusted individuals. And due to the shame, fear, and other barriers elders face in reporting abuse, only a limited number of victims are able to get the help they need. And whereas elders throughout the United States lose an estimated $2.6 billion or more annually due to elder financial abuse and exploitation, such as the illegal taking, misuse, or concealment of funds, property, or assets of a senior for another's benefit. And whereas too often elder abuse threatens the livelihoods of older individuals, erodes their extraordinary potential, and increases their risk of death by 300% compared to seniors who have not been mistreated. And whereas Salina's vulnerable and older adults of all social, economic, racial, and ethnic backgrounds may be targets of abuse, neglect, or exploitation, which can occur in families, long-term care communities, and medical settings. And whereas we all have the responsibility to support the safety, welfare, and dignity of vulnerable and older adults, and must work towards ending elder abuse by assisting victims in accessing the information and supportive services they need, creating better and more resources for older adults in need, instituting effective intervention and prevention policies, and engaging in discussion with family members and peers to promote awareness and prevention of the quiet epidemic of elder abuse. Now therefore, the City of Salina Board of Commissioners hereby proclaim June 2023 as Elder Abuse Awareness Month in the City of Salina, and urges all citizens to work together to help protect elder adults from abuse, neglect, and exploitation, because it is imperative that we refuse to tolerate the indignity of elder abuse.
Thank you. If someone's believes they know of an elder that is potentially being abused, who would they contact and how would they go about doing that?
So Adult Protective Services through DCF would be the first report. And then for services and supportive services, they can always call DVAC.
Okay, because that's, I do know that's out there as much as we hate to admit it. And so is there anything else that the public can do to be aware and what to look for?
So I will come and do trainings like red flag. So last week we had Red Flag Week at the Senior Center. This week we are doing questions and answers and cupcakes at the Senior Center on the 15th. We're also doing game day at the Senior Center on the 21st. And so that gives like bits of information, but anywhere I go to nursing homes and speak, also train like CNA staff, nursing staff, and other staff in the nursing facilities. So
For what to look for. Well, good. Well, again, it's one of those jobs I wish we didn't have, but we do, and we appreciate the work that you and your group do. I do have a proclamation, if you could come forward. Got a gentleman that wants to take our picture here. Yeah, I'm afraid that's what we have to do. Thank you. Okay, that will lead us to item 3.2.
Item 3.2, recognition of the day of June 17, 2023 as Relay for Life Day in the city of Salina. Shandy Wicks, Relay for Life of Saline County Event Leadership Team Member, will read the proclamation.
Hello.
Hello.
Relay for Life of Saline County proclamation. Whereas the Relay for Life movement continues to be the largest peer-to-peer fundraising event with 2.5 million participants globally uniting to save lives from cancer. And whereas in 2023, roughly 1.9 million new cancer cases and 609,820 deaths from cancer are expected to occur in the United States, with more than 16,840 new cases expected to be diagnosed here in Kansas. Whereas Relay for Life of Saline County is an opportunity to celebrate people who have been touched by cancer, remember loved ones lost, and take action for life-saving change. And whereas dollars raised each year by more than 250,000 Relay participants across the country help support the American Cancer Society's mission in countless ways, including funding and conducting breakthrough research, providing education and advocating for needs of cancer patients and their families, and providing essential services throughout their cancer journey. And whereas during the month of June, we celebrate the nearly 18 million Americans who have bravely and successfully battled cancer to earn the designation survivor. To honor those survivors, June is designated as National Cancer Survivors Month, and Monday, June 4th, 2023 is National Survivor Day. Now therefore be it resolved that I, Michael L. Hoppick, Mayor of Salina, Kansas, do hereby proclaim June 17th, 2023 as Relay for Life Day in Salina, Kansas, and encourage citizens to let their passion inspire them to join the Relay for Life movement by attending the relay, starting or joining a fundraising team, making a donation, or volunteering with Relay for Life event at Kansas Wesleyan University on Saturday, June 17th, 2023.
Thank you, Shandy. Can you give us some details about Saturday's event times and that type of thing, and how people can participate?
Yes, we would like to invite all to our annual walk on Saturday, June 17th. It's from 4 to 11 at Kansas Wesleyan University campus. Festivities include a band, Fed Up, performing until the event starts, followed by our opening ceremony at 5 p.m. Our survivors will take their first lap of the evening at 5:30, led by a bagpipe player. Caregiver and team laps will follow shortly after. Bidding for silent auction baskets will begin at 4 p.m., going through 7:30 p.m., and those items can be viewed on our Saline County Relay for Life Facebook page. We have many activities during the course of the evening, including twirl and dance groups, games, a survivor dessert bar, music, and lots more. To honor National Cancer Survivors Month, we will have guest speakers to share their experiences with cancer at 7:30, with the luminaria ceremony to begin at 8:30, with closing ceremony and final fight back lap at 9:30. We encourage the community to join us in the fight against cancer because a cure would be sweet.
Wouldn't it, though?
It would.
And approximately how much do we raise in Saline County? Do you know that off the top of your head?
I don't.
Okay. I thought I
and
read something, but I can't remember what it was.
Not all of it will stay in Saline County. It goes to the state, but it helps with the lodge they have in Kansas City, getting people back and forth to appointments.
Yep. Okay. Well,
yeah.
we hope for a cure. I know the treatments are getting better. It's hard to, I'm not sure anyone in this room could say they actually don't know of anybody that's had cancer or been affected by it. So appreciate all the work you're doing. And
Thank you.
I have a proclamation for you.
Thank you.
Good to see you back in this room. Thank you. Okay. So I'll get those handed out.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, that will lead us to item 3.3.
Mayor, I will recuse myself from item 3.3.
Okay.
Item 3.3, recognition of the month of June 2023 as Pride Month in the city of Salina. Braden Gonzalez, board member and public relations manager for North Central Kansas Pride, will read the proclamation.
How are we doing today?
Good, thank you.
Proclaiming the month of June as Pride Month. Pride Month celebrates the love and acceptance and gives particularly a special freedom to individuals to express themselves freely without discrimination. Whereas the month of June has been recognized as Pride Month, a time to celebrate the history, achievements, and contributions of the LGBTQ community. And whereas Pride Month commemorates the Stonewall Uprising, a pivotal moment in the fight for LGBTQ+ rights and equality. And whereas the city of Salina recognizes the ongoing struggle for full and equal rights for the LGBTQ community and the right to be free from discrimination. And whereas the city of Salina acknowledges the progress that has been made, but also recognizes that work that still needs to be done to ensure that all individuals are treated with dignity and respect, regardless of their sexual orientation or gender identity. Therefore, I, Michael L. Hippenhawk, Mayor of the City of Salina, Kansas, do hereby proclaim the month of June 2023 as Pride Month. I encourage all individuals to celebrate the diversity and inclusivity of our community, to honor the contributions of the LGBTQ community throughout history, and to continue to work towards a future where everyone is treated with equality, respect, and love. In witness of whereof, I set my hand and cause the seal of City of Salina to be affixed this 12th day of June in the year 2023.
Thank you. I do have to admit, your proclamation made me look up the Stonewall Uprising because I was not familiar with that. So if nothing else, I have learned something with this. Are there any things scheduled this month by the LGBTQ community?
June 17th, the North Central Kansas Pride is hosting Mini Pride. There's a lot of activities that will be handed out, games, karaoke even. It's going to be at Eric Stone Stage at Oakdale Park. We encourage all entities to be involved with it. It's going to be a good time. And there's also Pride celebrations throughout the state of Kansas as well.
Okay, thank you for being with us. I have a proclamation for you also. Thank you for being with us. Somebody want to see if Commissioner Longbine. Okay, that will lead us to item 3.4.
Item 3.4, recognition of the day of June 19, 2023 as Juneteenth in the city of Salina. Margaret Dixon, president of Salina Juneteenth Committee, will read the proclamation.
Whereas the Declaration of Independence adopted on July 4, 1776, did not extend any freedoms to African American slaves in the newborn United States of America, and whereas the United States Constitution, ratified on September the 17th, 1787, did not protect the life and liberty of African American slaves in the United States, and whereas the Emancipation Proclamation issued by President Abraham Lincoln on January the 1st, 1863, was slow to be disseminated, particularly in the Confederate States, and often ignored or kept secret when it was heard. And whereas news of General Lee's surrender to General Grant on April 9, 1865, that officially ended the Civil War, was not immediately known throughout the South. And whereas Major General Gordon Granger arrived in Galveston, Texas on June 19, 1865, and announced the end of the Civil War, the intent of the Emancipation Proclamation, and the end of slavery. And whereas economic, educational, social, and physical slavery has continued in various ways over the next 150 years, Juneteenth has become a symbolic date representing African American freedom and a gesture towards reconciling America with its history so that the American dream with lasting peace and understanding is a reality for both the former master and slave. And whereas on June 17th, 2021, President Joe Biden signed into law legislation declaring Juneteenth the 12th national holiday. And since 2007, the state of Kansas has recognized Juneteenth and recently declared it an unpaid state holiday. The Salina Juneteenth Committee Incorporated is dedicated to the elimination of racism and cultivate knowledge and appreciation of African American history and culture. And the Juneteenth flag, shown here, was designed by Ben Haith in 1997 and is symbolic of America's struggle and progress away from slavery. The white star represents Texas, the Lone Star State, the home of the first Juneteenth and the first state to recognize Juneteenth as a state holiday, as well as the freedom of African Americans in all 50 states. The burst of Nova is a new beginning for the African Americans of Galveston and throughout the land. The curve across the width of the flag is a new horizon, the opportunities and promise that lay ahead for Black Americans. The red, white, and blue represents the American flag, a reminder that slaves and their descendants were and are Americans. Now, therefore, I, Michael L. Hopcock, Mayor of the City of Salina, Kansas, do hereby declare June 19, 2023 as Juneteenth in the City of Salina, Kansas, and urge all citizens to become more aware of the significance of this celebration in African American history and in the heritage of our nation and city.
Thank you, and I appreciate the explanation about the flag on here, and maybe we've had that before, and I just didn't remember, so appreciate that. I know Juneteenth is coming up here pretty quick. What activities do we have scheduled for Monday?
Well, it would be Saturday, June 17th. We will start at the City Light Stage with a pre-proclamation dance, the proclamation reading, and a post-proclamation dance. The parade will line up right there, too, by the City Light Stage and go south down Santa Fe and end in Oakdale Park, where we will commence with a gospel show at the Eric Stein Stage starting at 12. Well, the celebration is 12 to 4. The Eric Stein Stage, that will start at 1. The gospel show and other activities. There will be bouncy houses for the kids, vendors, bingo, trivia, a lot of different activities. And then starting at 8 o'clock that night, there will be a celebration dance at the Quality Inn on West Crawford from 8 to 2.
Okay. Sounds like Saturday's going to be very busy in Salina
it is.
between that and Relay for Life. So if you can't find anything to
can't
do,
stay
it's
up
your
that
own
late.
fault, correct?
Right.
So, okay, well, thank you for being here and sharing with us, and I also have a proclamation for you. So we can face. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I said Monday because I know I'm closed Monday, so naturally. Okay, with that, we will move on to the consent agenda.
Item 5.1, approve the minutes of the meeting of June 5, 2023.
Is there any additions or corrections or deletions from the minutes a commissioner would like to make?
Mayor, I move we approve the minutes of the meeting June 5th, 2023.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve consent agenda item 5.1. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? That passes 5-0. That will lead us in,
Excuse me.
4-0, I'm sorry. That will lead us into administration.
Item 6.1, approve ordinance number 23-11154 on second reading, authorizing amendment and supplemental documents relating to taxable industrial revenue bonds, Series 2021.
Okay, ordinance number 23-11154 was passed on first reading on June 5th of 2023. Since that time, no comments have been received. Are there any questions or comments from the commission?
No.
Questions or comments from the public? If not, I will bring it back to the commission for a motion.
Mayor, I move we approve ordinance number 23-11154 on second reading.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve ordinance number 23-11154 on second reading. May we have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Davis,
Aye.
Commissioner Longbine,
Aye.
Commissioner Ryan,
Aye.
Mayor Hoppick.
Aye. That item passes 4-0. Okay, that will lead us to item 6.2.
Item 6.2, editorial clarification to the Smoky Hill Museum's collections policy.
Hello, I'm Susan Hawksworth, Museum Director at the Smoky Hill Museum. The Smoky Hill Museum was originally accredited by the American Alliance of Museums in 1997 and was reaccredited in 2009. It is currently undergoing the process of reaccreditation for a second time, and the museum is only one of 10 accredited museums in Kansas. Part of the accreditation process is the review of museum policies. One policy that holds a significant amount of weight with the Accreditation Commission is the collections policy. This policy outlines the scope of the museum's collections, explains how the museum cares for the collections, explains how the collections are made available to the public, and clearly defines the roles of those responsible for managing the collections. The collection policy is required to have the approval of the governing authority, and the current policy was approved by the City Commission on March 9, 2020. Upon review, an irregularity was identified. Under the ethics section, it states, staff will not acquire objects from the museum collections owned by or loaned to the museum unless such transactions are available through a public disposal process, which is public in nature. The last part of this statement, unless such transactions are available through a disposal process which is public in nature, is not in keeping with industry best standards and needs to be removed. This revision or this revised collection policy will then completely prohibit museum staff from acquiring any object under any circumstances. The Salina Arts and Humanities Commission already has approved this correction. Staff has identified the following options for the City Commission's consideration. 1, approve the proposed editorial change to the Smoky Hill Museum collection management policy. 2, postpone arrival to a specified date and time and provide staff direction regarding additional consideration. 3, vote to deny the editorial recommendation resulting in the policy not reflecting best practices for accreditation documentation preparation. Staff recommends the first option. Are there any
Okay.
questions?
Yeah, I'll look at,
Nothing here.
Just for clarity's sake, could you just make up a 10-second example of what the new wording would?
It just
Prohibit.
takes out that particular wording, so the new wording would read just staff will not acquire objects from the museum collections owned by or loaned to the museum.
And previously, staff would use these for other displays, or?
No, this is like if we were to deaccession an item from the collection and need to dispose of it, staff cannot obtain those items.
Staff can't be the people who receive it, okay.
other individuals could purchase it, just not staff.
If we were to.
If you were to sell it.
If
or
we were to sell it,
or
usually it would be something.
donated or
Or donated somewhere
Yeah.
else, yeah.
Okay. Makes perfectly good sense to me. Question?
As I read through this, can you remind me and the public what the museum hours are?
Museum is open Tuesday through Fridays, 11 to 5, and Saturdays, 10 to 5.
And closed Sunday?
We're closed Sunday and Monday.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. I need to get down there and visit.
You're invited. Staff is available by appointment Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, if that helps you any.
And it's open to the public for free. Donations are welcome, correct?
Correct.
So it's a great activity. It's things for all ages down there nowadays. So, okay. Any comments or questions from the public? Okay, if not, I will bring it back to the commission for action.
Mayor, I move we approve the proposed editorial change to the Smoky Hill Museum collection management policy.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the proposed editorial change to the Smoky Hill Museum collection management policy. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Well, thank you. Well, Susan, things must be well at home because I noticed your husband didn't turn off your mic, so.
That's right.
He's back there. In case you want to know, Susan's husband's back in the back room. He gave me a thumbs up, so he said, thank you for being here. Okay, that passed 4-0. That will lead us to item 6.3.
Item 6.3, award the bid for project number 23022 for pickleball court overlay construction at Oakdale Park to Multicon Inc. in the amount of $444,762.00, and authorizing the city manager to execute a contract with Multicon Inc. under circumstances in which both the bid award and authorization of the city manager to execute the contract are contingent upon fulfillment of the preconditions of A, receipt by the city of donated funds totaling $444,762.00 on or before July 12th, 2023, and B, fulfillment of all prerequisites under the bid documents.
Mr. Hammond.
Good afternoon, Mayor Hoppick and Commissioners. Today, as City Clerk stated, I'm here before you for consideration of awarding those bids and authorizing the city manager to enter into an agreement for pickleball court construction upon the fulfillment of conditions to take receipt of donated funds and to complete the requirements of the bid documents. Briefly, I wanted to kind of pull out a document about some of the pickleball facts about the sport and the growth of the sport. According to USA Pickleball, pickleball can be played as a singles or doubles game. Players can quickly learn the basic rules of the sport. No special apparel or equipment is needed except for a ball and a net, or a ball and a racket, which is relatively inexpensive and easily portable. The game can be played by all ages, particularly popular in school physical education programs, adult living communities. They also make some mention about Special Olympics for pickleball. 2023 marks the 58th anniversary of pickleball, which was invented in the United States in 1965. As of 2022, there were 10,700 pickleball courts and increased by 1,557, or approximately 130 new locations a month to play pickleball. Pickleball grew in 2021 to 4.8 million players. It averages 11.5% growth over the past 5 years. 60% of the total participants are men and 40% women. The average age for all players continues to drop, currently at 38.1 years old. So it's a fast-growing sport. And lastly, I mentioned that Special Olympics. In 2018, Master Plan did call out the poor condition of the tennis courts. Since then, through partnerships with Salina Tennis Alliance and USD 305, tennis courts have been constructed at Kenwood Park and soon to be open at Jerry Ivy Park as part of USD 305's program. The master plan also does call out pickleball. It was ranked rather low on the total priority matrix, but it does call out the development of pickleball courts. It also mentions, the master plan also mentions the quality ranking of tennis facilities. It states to remove the north asphalt courts and to upgrade the south concrete courts. The subsurface of the south tennis courts is concrete and visually intact, without any significant horizontal or vertical separation of the subsurface. There's some expansion joints in there and a few minor concrete cracks, and there's failed court surfacing, which has some minor cracks in it. The south courts are also currently being used by the pickleball group in town. Lines are painted onto the courts, creating 4 pickleball areas, and additional pickleball nets were provided. The north tennis courts are that asphalt subsurface, which has shown significant horizontal separation of the asphalt and failed court surfacing. Additionally, those north tennis courts have been identified for demolition, which would allow for the future use of the Smoky Hill River Festival. Staff were approached by representatives of a donor group expressing a desire to fully fund pickleball courts at Oakdale Park. Staff proceeded to create a proposed scope of work and request quotes for an overlay of post-tension concrete on top of that existing court, south court slab, concrete slab. Provide new pickleball net posts, new nets, new court fencing, and new perimeter fencing. With the knowledge of the scope of work and the quotes for the work, the representatives of the donor group remained interested in fully funding the project. Staff solicited fee proposals from local architects to provide specifications and drawings for the scope of work, with the intent of using those specifications and drawings for a competitively bid construction project. The architect, Warren Ediger, was selected to provide those drawings and specifications. The architect's plans were included in the bid package and published by the city on its website and the Salina Journal on May 16th, and with a due date of June 1st. The bid package included a base bid for the existing tennis court slab to be prepared on the south courts to receive 2 inches of sand over the existing concrete slab to create a grade to achieve positive drainage from the new pickleball, or the proposed new pickleball courts. Post-tension concrete slabs over the existing tennis court slab. The addition of non-post-tensioned concrete aprons, walkways, and ADA approach slabs. 10 pickleball courts, new vinyl-coated chain link fencing and posts for the 8-foot perimeter fence and the 4-foot court fencing with gates, and court surfacing and striping with regulation pickleball nets. It also included an add alternate for the inclusion of windscreens. At this time for this project, city staff does not recommend the inclusion of the add alternate of the windscreens for the project. The references we received from the court installers stated that windscreens quickly became a maintenance headache. However, I would acknowledge that having windscreens would enhance pickleball play and is desired by the local pickleball players. However, staff would like to do more due diligence and investigation to discover successful installations of windscreens for other projects and pursue a request and funding for windscreens in the future. Staff received 3 bids from the June 1st bid opening. Multicon Inc. out of Wichita, Kansas for $444,762. PCC Sports was $516,357, and they're out of Kansas City. And McConnell and Associates of $626,820. They're out of Wichita as well. The low bidder, Multicon, is from Wichita, Kansas, as I mentioned, has completed a significant number of tennis court, pickleball court projects. References have been returned favorable for their flat concrete work and athletic court work. The representatives of the donor group indicated their desire to fully fund the bid amount of $444,762,000 and to provide the funds in a timely manner. As the fiscal note states, the proposed project will be funded by the donation in that amount. Site work for Oakdale Park has been identified to be planned and funded through the Parks and Recreation Department, including the removal of the north courts, sidewalk connectivity, grading of the site. Assuming this proposed project is funded, awarded, and contracted, our tentative timeline would be to start construction in August and be completed by December. During this proposed time, the available outdoor pickleball opportunities would be limited. However, there are indoor locations such as the Salina Fieldhouse and the Salina YMCA when they have court time available. Staff submits the options for City Commission consideration, and I'm going to be somewhat deliberate in how I read these. Number 1, contingently award the bids for the pickleball court overlay construction to Multicon in the amount of $444,762 and authorize the city manager to execute a contract with Multicon under the circumstances in which both the bid award and the authorization by the for the city manager to execute the contract are contingent upon the fulfillment of the preconditions of A, the receipt by the city of the donated funds totaling $444,762 on or before July 12th, and B, fulfillments of all prerequisites under the bid documents. Number 2 would be to contingently award the bids for the pickleball court overlay construction in the amount of $444,762 and authorize the city manager to execute a contract with Multicon, Inc. under the circumstances in which both the bid award and the authorization for the city manager to execute the contract are contingent upon fulfillment of the preconditions of A, the receipt by the city of the donated funds of $444,762 on or before July 12th, and B, fulfillment of all prerequisites under the bid documents with amendments as the city commission deems appropriate. 3, postpone awarding the bids for the pickleball court overlay construction to a specified date and time, and provide staff direction regarding additional information or amendments the city commission would like to request for further consideration. And 4, vote to deny awarding the bids for pickleball court overlay construction and provide staff further direction. Staff recommends option 1. I'll stand for any questions that you might have.
Okay, I will. Commissioner Longbody.
Coincidentally, I was in Park City last week, and I drove by a place that said Multicon. Is that the same place?
I believe Multicon is in town doing other work.
Okay, this was down in Park City, Kansas.
Oh, they have a couple aspects of their company, Multicon Construction, Multicon Builds, so they have a court buildings portion of their company is my understanding. But they do have a Park City office is my understanding as well.
Okay. We didn't have any details in the packet here about, my concern is 2 inches of sand, and is it going to be 4 inches of concrete, or?
It'll be 4 inches of post-tension concrete, yes, sir.
So it's going to raise that up 8 inches or 6 inches. And is that going to include all the paint?
That includes all the surfacing, the court surfacing and painting of lines, yes.
Okay, and the nets?
And the nets. And
Will the
posts,
nets be permanently placed?
The nets can be taken down or taken up or down if we wish to, but the posts would be somewhat permanent, and the nets could be removed or kept up year-round if we like.
I observed what's there the other day at the festival and saw the nets were somewhat portable.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that was part of that, trying to make the tennis courts work for the pickleball group. The group painted lines last year sometime, and then we provided the portable pickleball nets. But these would be permanent nets as part of this proposed project.
And they would stay up year-round, do you think, or?
If pickleball is played year-round, then they would stay up year-round.
Okay. Well, yeah, I thank you to the donor making this possible. Salina is way behind on pickleball, so look forward to seeing this happen.
Just one question. Is money going to be withheld from the donation anticipating we may get the windshield in the future, or will the city just pay that? It looks like a fairly nominal amount. The city would just pick that up later.
It's my intent to identify the windscreen that I would like to install from the due diligence of doing reference checks and talking to other communities who have similar courts and request the funding at that time. That would be city funding. Request city funding for that.
Okay.
No questions. Thank you very much to the donors for the gift.
Yep.
It's a great sport. I play it. It's growing fast, so I think there'll be a lot of people that appreciate this new facility. So, great.
It's amazing when I look at the parks master plan, and it was that low on the list, because 6 years of being on the commission, I think it's the most asked question I get is, when are we going to get pickleball courts outdoors? So appreciate this. So I will open it up to
two things. I think part of that is the explosion of pickleball and the intervening time from when we did the park master plan and today, and then I'm going to put Jeff on the spot a little bit. It's noteworthy that the donors have not asked for recognition and have kind of treated this anonymously, but he might be able to elaborate on their thinking at least, because I expect people are going to ask, well, who are the donors?
The group, the donor group, and the representative of that donor group intended this to be, and I'm not using these words, my own words, I'm using their words. They intended it to be somewhat of a gift to the community. And they wanted the gift, if you will, to be enjoyed in a public park, to be enjoyed by all in a setting that has resources already available, bathrooms, trees, part of a park, without any name associated with it, without a facility name or going through the municipal naming guidelines. And it was a great thing.
Any questions or comments from the public?
Mayor, I might ask, if I may, that if there is a motion to approve, the language of option 1 is, as you probably gathered, intentional as far as the contingent status of both the award and the authorization of the city manager to be compliant with Kansas cash basis law, as far as being sure that those funds are on hand before the bid is formally awarded and a contract entered into.
Okay.
So you'd like the motion to...
Yeah, I'm sorry. The point of all that was, please read the whole.
Okay, I'm slow, but I kind of got
if
that.
If one wishes to make the motion, the whole text would be helpful for the record.
Yeah. Okay, I will bring it back to the commission for...
Mayor, I would move that the city commission contingently award the bids for the pickleball court overlay construction to Multicon Inc. in the amount of $444,762 and authorize the city manager to execute a contract with Multicon Inc. under circumstances in which both the bid award and the authorization for the city manager to execute the contract are contingent upon fulfillment of the preconditions of A, the receipt by the city of the donated funds totaling $444,762 on and before July 12th, 2023, and B, fulfillment of all prerequisites under the bid documents.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion, a second, and to stay in good graces with the attorney, I'm going to read the whole thing again, so bear with me. Contingently award the bids for the pickleball court overlay construction to Multicon Inc. in the amount of $444,762 and authorize the city manager to execute a contract with Multicon Inc. under circumstances which both the bid award and the authorization of the city manager to execute the contract are contingent upon fulfillment of the preconditions of A, the receipt by the city of the donated funds totaling $444,762 on or before July 12, 2023, and B, fulfillment of all prerequisites under the bid documents. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? That passes 4-0. And before we move on from this, I didn't know, this probably wouldn't have been appropriate before we voted, but again, Salina is unique in the partnerships we have, both when we talk about public and private partnerships. This is completely private, and we do greatly appreciate this. We just finished up with a river festival that took hours and hours of volunteers, and so again, another example of what Salina does. A few weeks ago, maybe it was just last week, we were out at Lakewood Park. Great Plains Manufacturing donated and helped us put in new equipment at Lakewood Park, and I told everybody, as we were getting ready to do that, somebody asked me, do you enjoy being mayor? And I said, some days I don't, and some days I do. It's when we're able to do things like this, I really enjoy being the mayor of the city of Salina. So thank you again for that. Another example of Salina leading the way in the state of Kansas, if not everywhere. So thank you again to whoever those donors are. So. And by the way, the windscreens, I'm not sure they're needed. I can put more spin on the wiffle ball if I have wind, I think. So just, okay, that will lead us to item 6.4.
Item 6.4, award the bid for project number 22021, Cedar Point Addition, for water, sanitary sewer, street, and drainage improvements to TRR Inc., DBA T&R Construction of Salina in the amount of $969,409.19, with a 5% construction contingency for a total project authorization not to exceed $1,017,909.19, and authorize the city manager to execute a contract with T&R upon fulfillment of all prerequisites under the bid documents.
Okay. Mr. Stack.
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. This is a 22-lot subdivision, north side of Cedar Ridge Drive, just kind of opposite of the Cedar Ridge Phase 2 that the Cools have recently completed construction on, or starting to get houses to be built there. This is on the north side of, just kind of across the street from that area. It does back up to the municipal golf course. So some of the lots in here will be, of course, prime real estate for being on a golf course development. We have been in the works with them for a while on this property. And thank you, Scott, for getting the map here. I always like working on my maps here, so I got my pointer. We can talk about the couple of cul-de-sacs, basically, is what this is. A cul-de-sac here, cul-de-sac here. There's two of them. They just come off Cedar Ridge Drive, just straight north of the Valley View subdivision, if you guys know where that is. There will be an intersection basically right here with Valley View. And drainage pond over here, which they've sized appropriately to not inundate hole number 5 and tee box 6 there. So it's been worked with the municipal golf course on that as well. So just a few details there. One last thing to note is there is a stretch of unimproved Cedar Ridge Drive right here that abuts the subdivision, and so as part of our plating and development policy for a perimeter streets, they were required to kind of deal with that road, and that road needs an upgrade, and it's about 350 feet, so it's not a lot, but it is some, and it will be improved just like basically to the west of there, just like Cedar Ridge is now. And then further over here, east of that area, will be Briargate and Blue Stem. Those subdivisions the city will undertake trying to improve that road as well. So we're in final design stages of that section of the road. Those subdivisions were built prior to kind of having a perimeter streets policy, so Old County Road, old Cloud Road, if you remember that. So it's been chip sealed and crack sealed many times, as you can see out there. So it's definitely needing an upgrade. It is kind of nice to do this section first with the Cedar Point subdivision. I mean, it'd be nice to do it all together, but the Cedar Point subdivision really impacts Valley View. So they'll have to do half of this at a time. So Valley View is a dead-end road, so we have to keep access to it. So it's really a phased project anyway. We'll do the first phase with Cedar Point, and then hopefully later this summer we'll bring back to you the rest of Cedar Ridge Drive for award of bids as well. So with that, I'll just talk about the price. TRR Construction does a lot of work for the city, has done quite a few subdivisions, and actually came in quite a bit under the engineer's estimate in this case, which was very nice. It's not often that's been happening these days, so we'll take it. And then really makes this subdivision, we originally had this at $62,000 a lot, which was going to be pretty high. However, we're down to $52,000 a lot, so it's pretty similar to the one across the street. So that would be nice if we can bring it into home with a pretty similar assessment, which is what it is. $52,000 assessments are not cheap, but they're, at least it's not in the 60s yet, so we'll take it. So I will entertain any other questions you might have.
Okay, I will look to my left.
I have none.
None.
Okay. Any comments or questions from the public?
Norman Mantle, Salina. Have you ever brought in U.S. Fish and Wildlife be signing off on these projects? Because they're required to be in here. This is federal.
Could you be more specific about the source of that requirement, please?
Look it up online.
Okay, I'm sorry. Would the applicant like to comment?
Well, I understand that there may be a little bit of concern regarding moving forward with the approval of this. So I just wanted to reiterate that as a reminder, there's our covenants currently over in Cedar Ridge allow for 2 years before they have to build. So we have sold 2 lots, and those people are getting ready to build. We've got one that's just waiting on the contractor. The other one is still getting ready to working on their plans and things of that nature. We are quite comfortable with paying any specials on Cedar Ridge and then moving forward with this project. The specials for this project will not come due until December of 2025. In all of our projections, we are right on target with tracking, and so I just wanted to reiterate, it's our financial responsibility. The city has no responsibility in this, as far as the specials and carrying that load. So I just wanted to reiterate that. Any questions for me?
I don't think so.
I appreciate your optimism.
Excuse me?
I appreciate your optimism. You got 2 lots sold over there?
We sure do.
Okay.
And you realize that the 2020 housing study calls for a need of 48 units in our price range by the end of 2025 and 98 units by the end of 2030. There's also, rumor has it, that there's a really big company that's going to get ready to come to town with 6-figure paying jobs, and so we're hopefully very much optimistic.
Okay. I'm glad you're comfortable.
Are you not?
Well, I have concerns that we're breaking into and overbuilding a little bit.
In all areas of the market, or?
Just in general, yeah.
So are you going to question all projects that are moving forward, or?
No, I would just like to see progress before you open up another project.
But that's not really your, you're not taking the risk, correct? That's our.
That's your risk.
Our risk.
If you're
and we
comfortable with it.
As the owners, right?
If you're comfortable, I'm.
And our bank certainly isn't questioning it either.
Okay.
I'd like to go on the record as that. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, comments or questions from the public? Okay, I will bring it back to the commission for action.
Mayor, I move we approve the construction bid award for Cedar Point Addition to TRR Inc., DBA TNR Construction, in the amount of $969,409.19 with a $48,500 5% construction contingency for a total project authorization not to exceed $1,017,909.19, and authorize the city manager to execute a contract with TRR Inc., DBA TNR Construction, upon fulfillment of all prerequisites under the bid documents.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the construction bid awards of Cedar Point Addition to TRR Inc., doing business as TNR Construction, in the amount of $969,409.19 with a $48,500 5% construction contingency for a total project authorization not to exceed $1,017,909.19, and authorize the city manager to execute a contract with TRR Inc., doing business as TNR Construction, upon fulfillment of all prerequisites under the bid documents. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
That item passes 3-1. Thank you very much, and good luck. That will lead us to item 7.1.
Item 7.1, approve resolution number 22-8088, declaring that a structure located at 901 North 7th Street is unsafe and dangerous and must be removed, and establishing a reasonable deadline for removal of the dangerous structure.
Mr. Hohen.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor, Commissioners. I'm here to talk about Resolution 22-8088, and we spoke about that last in October last year, on the 24th to be precise. And what was discussed at that time at the public hearing was the condition of the structure, the need for securing it during all phases of work. If you will remember, the owner, Clinton Ziegelmeyer, had a desire to salvage some of the materials from the structure that's going to come down, and he also had a desire that it come down. In fact, he has an idea to rezone that portion of his property to match adjacent properties which he owns. And so I'm bringing this back before you now because in that October 24th meeting, action on this item was postponed. So I want to fill you in on what has happened since then. I was actually directed to bring this back on November 7th. However, after the October 24th meeting, the resolution was not signed and it didn't make it back on the agenda. And we were not without progress, but I have not been back to you until now, formally. In the interim, I've been in constant contact with Mr. Ziegelmeyer, and he has begun work. He's salvaged just about all materials except those which are structural that he wants to salvage. And he has also removed most of the materials which are not structural from the property. And there we go. Thank you, Mr. Gardner. For the benefit of the folks and the citizens, these pictures were in the packet, but we have some pictures on each page of this document. The upper picture is from October, just prior to the meeting on the 24th, and the lower picture is a similar shot except from last week. And as you can see, there are a number of things I want to point out in the picture. Mr. Ziegelmeyer has secured the site with 6-foot fencing, which has locked gates, and he is removing virtually everything, or probably has by the end of the day today. He actually sent an updated picture this morning showing even greater progress than what's demonstrated in these pictures that will be on the screen. Now, a couple of the reasons why I didn't make it back a little more quickly. You may remember that the 24th of October last year was the first time I had stood before you regarding dangerous structures. I was acting building official at that time and had just taken on that role. And frankly, the weightiness of the dangerous structure process and my desire to make sure that I knew it and my desire to make sure that everything we had done before I arrived and was exposed to the process had been done just as it needed to be. I took a little bit of time to review not only this structure, but all others which were pending in order that I could be sure that I was proceeding on good footing and bringing good information to you for action. And so I mentioned that Mr. Ziegelmeyer has begun the work and in fact completed just about everything that can be done without a permit. I've also spoken with him about the need to secure a permit in order to remove the rest of the structure, the structural elements particularly, and he has already been to the city to begin that process. He now has a dumpster that is out at the property, and as he finishes up the last of the work that he can do himself. He did mention to me in conversation earlier today that before he had engaged with a particular contractor in town, and he expects to be able to engage with that contractor again in order to bring the work to completion. He does have a desire to salvage some of the studs, some of the structural elements from the building, and so he would work with the contractor to do that. Now, Mr. Gardner, if you want to scroll through the photographs, you can see some of the before. Those are October last year shots, and then a similar shot below that from last week. As I mentioned, there's actually more progress that's been made on the roof, some of the shingles and some of the boxing and the things that can be removed without a permit he has removed. But you can see he's now making very significant progress in about the last 4 weeks. Now, I see 2 paths to completion for the demolition and removal of this dangerous structure. One is to allow Mr. Ziegelmeyer a bit more time to get his permit to commence the demolition on the structural elements and to complete the work using a licensed contractor of his choosing. And with the exception of inspection costs, which the city would incur no matter how the structure comes down and is removed, that would cost us nothing. And so that would be option one. The second option would be, in order to ensure very timely demolition, we could intervene if you should choose to, in which case I would prepare contract documents and put out this work for bids. I suspect that the cost for this, the bid process and the actual payment for the work and everything associated would be somewhere in the neighborhood of $25,000. And that would be paid by the city and then later billed to the property owner. And if the costs were not collected timely, then any balance owed would be assessed against the property through the Register of Deeds according to our usual process for abatement actions. Now, my recommendation is reflected in Resolution 22-8088, but I recommend that the city allow Mr. Ziegelmeyer until the end of the business day on June 26th, 2023, to secure his permit. A part of securing the permit is securing a contractor who is licensed with the city, and that's the reason to give him a bit of time to do that in order to select someone who is able to say yes, they can do the work. My recommendation is to allow him till the end of the business day, July 12th, 2023, for commencement of the demolition work on the structural elements. And finally, to allow until the end of the business day, September 12th, 2023, for ultimate completion. And I've chosen these dates rather intentionally because I believe these to be very reasonable dates for the expected timeline that I could bring about the accomplishment of this work due to contractor availability. And so it seems sensible to me to allow the owner to continue with the progress that he is making. So I've identified the following options for your consideration. First, to approve Resolution 22-8088. The second, to approve Resolution number 22-8088 with amendments as the Commission deems appropriate. Thirdly, to postpone consideration of Resolution number 22-8088 to a specified date and time, and then provide direction regarding additional information or amendments the Commission would like to request for further consideration. And finally, option 4, vote to deny Ordinance 22-8088, resulting in a need to prescribe some other action in order to bring this matter to completion. Are there any questions for me?
Okay, I will look to my left.
I just have one. Any complaints from the neighbors about the time it's taking?
No, sir, not one. I've been in touch with Mr. Ziegelmeyer nearly weekly. I can't say weekly since October, but weekly for the last 4 or 5 weeks, and I have not heard anything at all from neighbors.
If he doesn't secure the permit, will you be back here again, or are we asking for an extension at that point, possibly?
The permit is rather easy to secure. He is in a district where there will not be a cost to him for the permit for the demolition of the building. He simply has to meet the requirement of providing a contractor who is licensed to do the work, and he has indicated to me a desire to do so. But with that qualification, to answer your question, if he does not secure the permit by the appropriate time, then I would go ahead and initiate beginning to draw up documents and step in and intervene to make sure it was done by a licensed
And he
contractor.
desires to secure a contractor, or he's
Yes.
got somebody in mind? And
Yes,
he's
in
kinda-
fact,
he's
yes.
there.
Yes, he had spoken with Chris Johnson with Excel Dirt and Excavating in October and was planning to utilize him, and he has communicated to me a desire to engage him again and has said that he will likely list him as the contractor to
Okay.
finish the work.
I guess it crossed my mind to give him an extra week across all 3 of those dates if it, would benefit the process. But if you're confident that he's going to carry through, then I guess it's good as written.
So will it be the property owner that draws the permit or the contractor?
It could be either. Usually in demolition cases, it is the contractor, and I've communicated that to Mr. Ziegelmeyer in our last conversation. He could apply for it. The usual practice is for the contractor to do so on behalf of the property owner because they know the process. But Mr. Ziegelmeyer and I have been in constant communication, and he's now very familiar with our process as well. So it's really his option.
Okay. And if this does fall back on the city, years ago, this is not a good location for this, but years ago, a structure like this, fire department used to train with. Is that still an
Yeah,
option?
the state fire marshal's office doesn't condone those type of burns for environmental and other reasons. So we, quite some time ago, have steered away from kind of a controlled training burn approach. I'm not going to say that they won't permit it in certain circumstances, but and I can't tell you exactly when the fire department deemed it just too cumbersome to
It's a great
do that.
training opportunity, but that wouldn't be a good location to.
Yeah, we do have a controlled burn structure that we train in, so we have the opportunity to have a little bit more of a controlled environment to train than.
The question I had is you talked about how the owner was going to be in there salvaging items while the demolition was going on. So you're comfortable with that? I guess that's something I've never heard before.
Yes, sir. In this case, I suspect that Mr. Siegelmeyer will work out an arrangement with the contractor who is ultimately responsible for the work. That's the reason we have the license requirement, their insurance requirements, and such. And so anything they work out between them, as long as the licensed contractor is shouldering the responsibility to do the work, then that would be acceptable, certainly to us, for them to work that out and be able to salvage some of the materials.
And then we use the word commence demolition, so they have to be on site beginning demolition by the July 12th date then, the contractor. Yes, okay. Any questions or comments from the public? Is the property owner here that would like to comment or anything? Okay, if not, I will bring it back to the commission for action.
Mayor, I move we approve resolution number 228088.
Second.
We have a motion, a second, to approve resolution number 22-8088. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? That item passes 4-0. Thank you very much. Okay, that will lead us to other business. Is there an item that the commissioner would like to bring before the group?
Yes. And I apologize, I don't have as much information as I need to give you, but there's an upcoming Crossroads Marathon. In the back of my mind, I think it's October, November, but anyone here know? But the organizer reached me. They would, for some funding requests, they would like a letter of support from the city. I don't know in what form the support needs to come, but I'll get more information and give it to the city manager.
The mayor and I have recently been coordinating on requests like that, kind of sizing up. They can be initiated by myself, the mayor, or whether they need to come to you. So as the governing body, give me some more information. We'll be happy to work that through.
Okay.
Mayor Hoppick touched on it earlier, the River Festival that occurred over the weekend, and I want to thank all the city staff and volunteers that put on a great festival, and whoever was in charge of the weather knocked it out of the park. So
I think Brad Edmondson took credit for it a week in advance. So he called his shot.
yeah, that was perfect weather, bug-free, and great time.
It was an excellent time. Second to none. Had a lot of good comments from individuals here for the first time. They actually, some of the vendors stated it's usually not this organized, and it's not treated as with the way they are here. So a couple of them said they hope they're invited back. So that was good to hear from some new vendors. So, okay, that leads us to Citizens Forum. It's an opportunity for anyone who'd like to come forward to talk about an item for 3 minutes. Up to 3 minutes. You don't have to use your full 3 minutes if you don't want.
Rosemary Mai, Salina, Kansas. I just wanted-
Rosemary, you might pull your mic down.
I thought my voice carries. I probably didn't
It probably
need it.
does, but just to be sure. There you go.
I wanted to let you know that the Granny Brigade is hosting a public information on sex trafficking next week, Tuesday, June the 20th at 7 p.m. at the Carver Center. And our speaker will be Suze Alexander, and we will also have the Chief of Police and one of his lieutenants there, and also Sheriff Sodom. So if the public is invited, I think it will be a very informational meeting for Salina.
Okay. Thank you for sharing that with us.
Could you give time?
Could you give the time again? And the date? You might, it's just.
Next week, Tuesday, June the 20th at 7 p.m. at the Carver Center.
Carver. Thank you.
Norman Mantle, Salina. Nothing here on your proclamation issues, and you won't be able to announce it next Monday because you won't be here. But do any of you know when Flag Day is, and it's when it's honored?
15th. I mean, when's the holiday? The holiday?
Uh-huh.
June 15th.
It's on the calendar list.
I mean, unless it's changed. It was when I was growing up. 14th? Seriously?
Yeah,
That explains why I missed it then. Okay.
every year. Nobody's ever mentioned it in this room. That's a lack of attention on your part.
Well, I guess my excuse was I had the day wrong, but. But
Okay. Anyone else? Okay. If not, I will accept a motion to.
We'll go on.
sorry.
Oh,
We got one
that way.
more. Commissioner Humphrey, the second. I'm just here to piggyback the elder abuse. Yeah, it's a tough one to discuss, but as I am pursuing the ombudsman, I think it's a good time to bring up the residents' rights. And state regulation, 2639103 numbers. Right to dignified existence, right of self-determination. They have the right to refuse. Right to be fully informed, right to privacy, right to raise grievances, right of access to personal records and such, and rights during discharge and transfer so that they could have a plan. Elder abuse is at many levels, and as I'm a CNA building my foundation, and I don't really have like a nurse's lullaby, but no matter who you pray to, I believe that you deserve to be at rest with dignity. That's all I have, and thank you.
Thank you. Okay, anyone else? Okay, with that, I will accept a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion and second adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, we will see everyone in 2 weeks.